Hi, my name is John Redmond. I'm running for Frisco City Council, Place 3, and I'm here today with my good friend, Johnnie Yellock. He's an American hero and my friend, as I just said, but we're going to have a conversation today to learn a little bit more about me, my campaign, and why I'm doing this. So I'm going to defer to Johnnie to drive the conversation. So thanks for being here.
I am honored to be here. More honored to be your friend and to have been so for so long than to have the name of American hero. So that's an opinion, but a fact is that we're good friends, have been so for about a decade, and I'm honored to know you. I'm excited for those that'll watch this one day to be able to get to know you just as well as I have throughout the years, and I think that the position that you're running for will give you the ability to do so. So why now?
Why now? Well, you were part of the first campaign a little bit, right?
Yeah.
You got to see, for those that don't remember, 7 years ago, Frisco had an open seat, and I was one of 9 individuals that raised my hand and decided to run. So the good news is I ran, and the important part is I learned, right? The reality is we didn't do very well. Out of 9 people, I finished 9th. But as I said, I took the opportunity to learn and grow and really understand. And so today I feel much more prepared. I obviously remained engaged in the city and did a lot of I think the necessary things from a community relations standpoint, but engaging for myself, for my friends, for my family, it's the right time. I have always gravitated towards leadership and kind of towards the front, right, wrong, or indifferent, whether it's the men's golf group at the club or whether it was a nonprofit group where I was a part of, leaning in to, lead that effort.
Well, so oftentimes it's not your intrinsic desire to be at the front in a leadership position. It's your peers whose trust you've earned that push you into those positions. And I can attest to the fact that you should be at the front. So when you're out traveling the world, as you have been recently, and you mention where you live, this great city of Frisco, how do you explain it to them?
So it's interesting, right? When I moved to Frisco 19 years ago, we're actually in downtown Dallas. So it's interesting because I was working in Las Colinas. And so many of the people that live in Dallas and the close Dallas suburbs are like, Frisco, why'd you move to Oklahoma? Ha, 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 right? But the reality was it's an awesome suburb. It was far enough from Dallas that we felt like we could get into Dallas if we needed to. But we really appreciated the family first values and the culture at the time. And it didn't feel too big. It was certainly not too small. I've gone back and looked at the numbers. I thought when we moved in 2006, we were closer to 60 or 70,000 people. According to the census numbers, we were probably closer to 90. And today we're, over 240 and climbing, right? So when I tell, people I live in Frisco, northern suburb of Dallas, fastest growing place in America, a lot of people recognize the name. A lot of people think I'm talking about San Francisco, which is always funny. But the reality is it's not something that people haven't heard of. So running for city council and being a part of leading the future vision for what Frisco is ultimately going to become, I think could be really cool.
Yeah. How do you think you could be a part of Frisco continuing to grow, but maintaining that small town feel and that culture that you mentioned?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that I see to that, in full transparency, is I think that horse is out of the barn, right? So part of what we're seeing today and part of the reason for my running is I want to lean in and I want my fellow citizens to also lean in and really create the culture that drew people to Frisco. The reasons we moved there was not to be the city of Dallas, not to be Chicago where I used to live, not to be a large scale city, urban, right? But suburban, and those things are changing, right? So I don't think it's a matter of there aren't fantastic things happening. I think it's a matter of managed, sustained growth tap the brakes a little bit, because what we're seeing is we've gained momentum. We've got kind of that critical mass that people talk about. And now we're in this hyper growth mode where it's like, let's race to get this thing fully built out. And in the conversations I've had and I'm having, I think there's a lot of people that makes them a little nervous, and it's not quite the city that they move to.
Right. So we mentioned leadership and your propensity to always find yourself in that position. The city council is built up with a whole host of leaders that have been there a while, and they're doing the job, taking the fight to creating change, a positive way for the city. What do you bring to that fight and to that group of leaders?
Yeah, so as a small business owner, first and foremost, someone who grew up in corporate America, I've worked for very large companies in leadership positions. I've worked for really small companies, including the one that we're building today. I talk a lot about, and used to talk on stage a lot about, intentionality, right? Being intentional. You can be aspirational, that's fantastic, right? But executing against those aspirational goals has to be intentional. And so in those intentions, how I have been most successful in my career has been through being collaborative, right? Bringing other people into the fold, putting my arms around people, coming to consensus, right? We don't have to agree on everything, but we can certainly come to a place where we agree enough to continue to move the ball forward. And ultimately, I think we go further, faster together than we do having these, chirpy conversations at each other from the edges.
Right. It seems like people can get caught up on issues and whether they're partisan or nonpartisan, bipartisan, right?
Right.
But effectively in city council, you're dealing with things that impact your citizens on a daily basis in a real way, a tangible way. For instance, if there's a pothole that needs to get fixed, it doesn't matter to the citizen whether which party got that done.
That's right. And we've got a fantastic public works department. We've got a fantastic engineering services department. Like the Frisco city government, I think the thing that, when you look into how the sausage is made, the Frisco city government and staff, right, are phenomenal, right? 1,800 men and women working hard for the citizens of Frisco, and I think that's important. When you look at the different, org charts, so to speak, right, it should be the citizens at the top, and many times it is the citizens at the top. The mayor and the city council get credit as advisory and kind of board leadership. That's kind of how I look at it. And then it's the city manager and all the department heads that kind of actually do the stuff, right? And we as citizens want to make sure that our voices are heard and that the people that are advising the city are getting advice or seeking advice themselves. And so that's really kind of one of the main reasons why I'm running. And what, to your earlier question, I think I bring is that ability to govern or execute the way you campaign, right? So when you go out and you talk to people, I want to have a conversation, but I want to understand, how does that conversation lead into action and where we're going to go together.
Right. Yeah, that's fantastic. I've known you a long time, and I've always known that at your core, your foundation is built on intentionality. It's your number one word. I'm surprised it's not your custom license plate in some way. But how you'll govern is going to be based on that foundation of intentionality. Mm-hmm. So what are the things that you can think of offhand that you'll be focusing on?
So I think we've covered a couple of them. Sorry. So it's that collaboration. It's engaging in others. And I know that people have had, hike and bike or, coffee with the mayor or different things, right? I know there are town hall forums occasionally. But for me, I think it needs to be more often. I think it needs to be more intentional. I think you need to engage the citizenry. We have an incredibly diverse and obviously growing community in Frisco. And so reaching out beyond the pockets of people that are already engaged, right? So it's pulling people in. It's engaging people like some of my friends and family that if you talk to them about politics, they'll engage in politics, but they're not thinking of politics, right? They're not going to actively engage and reach out, but you need their input. You need their understanding, right? You need their ideas. And be able to blend all that stuff together. So I think that's one of them. I think the other is, we've mentioned the word culture, right? Culture is broad. It's a broad-based word, right? But I think there are a lot of people like me. If you talked about what is Frisco to you, right? It's those family first kind of ideals. It's the small c conservative, right? So from a dictionary perspective, it's your friends, your family, your faith, right? Being fiscally responsible. Those are the things that I think resonate. We live in Texas, let's be real, right? I mean, I think those things absolutely resonate with people and are foundational to what we're going to do and how we're going to continue to build this city going forward.
That's fantastic. So looking for ways for people to engage, for you to engage with people, like you said, that otherwise would have no way or no conduit to having that conversation. So creating opportunities to get that necessary vital feedback from the people you want to serve.
Absolutely. And I think it can be done beyond the things that are in place, right? People overuse the word transparent or transparency. I think our city government is transparent. I think there's just a lot of people that aren't paying attention, right? And so being able to pay attention, being able to draw them in, right? Going to them where they are is different than expecting people to come to you, right? If I can reach out to you, and it doesn't have to be super formal, it can be really like this, very conversational, right? One-on-one, one-to-many, right? That's what I can envision is being impactful.
Right. And this is obviously much more scalable opportunity to be able to capture these thoughts and the things you're passionate about in a media form instead of, I mean, obviously it's one form of engaging with your population, but you don't have to knock on all the doors in order to be able to get into the homes of the people that you look to represent.
And that was the interesting part. When I ran the first time, we knocked on doors. We didn't knock on as many doors as we needed to.
There's a lot of doors.
It's a lot of doors, right? But if I'm looking at the camera, right, there are kind of three legs of this stool, right? There's a lot of people that all of a sudden they see the signs pop up and so they know it's campaign season. And that's a thing. It is noise, but it also provides legitimacy to the campaign and to, you know, in the advertising world, right, it takes 7 times before it kind of the message gets in, right? So if you drive past a sign 7 times, at some point it's seeping in, right? So there's the signs, there's people knocking on doors, there's about to be, you know, mailers. You're going to see stuff showing up where you live. Obviously, we're doing things like this. So digital media and marketing has become, in today's day and age, right, where we're always on our phone or we're always, you know, moving and going. These kinds of engagements in small snippets and small bite-sized pieces become very important, right? Because there are only so many forums. There's only so many opportunities to have people come to me, right? There are only so many opportunities and time in the day for me to go to them. So I'm really excited about these kind of conversations and doing this kind of stuff much more often than, you know, we did in the past.
So you mentioned the campaign. In the campaign, you're going to be saying a lot of things, right? You're going to run a campaign.
Right.
Speaking to the camera, how can you convince your people that you will fight for the same things once you're elected that you campaigned on?
So looking at you, the reality is you can't govern differently than you campaign. I think I said that earlier, right? There's a lot of people that, and this isn't unique to politicians, right? So I'm not bashing anybody. The reality is a lot of people that talk a great game, fantastic game. But when it comes down to it, it's hard, right? I recognize that being Frisco City Council person is going to be difficult. But doing it, not just selfishly for me, right? We didn't talk about this, and maybe I'll segue here quickly, is at the end of the day, we talked about the picture, right? The citizens are the boss, right? And so as a council person, I'm supposed to represent you. And so in doing that, we talked about municipal, right? We've elected people to go to Austin. We've elected people to go to Washington, D.C. You're going to elect me to go to George Purefoy Center and represent you, in Frisco. It's not a 2-day-a-month gig, right? I mentioned the 1,800 men and women that are working hard for Frisco. It's engaging with them, right? It's understanding those department heads, their staff, right? Their leadership, what they're doing actively. You talked about potholes, right? Whether it's traffic, whether it's our police and fire, right? There's a lot of things that are concerning to the citizens that there are people that's their job every day, right? But having that oversight, having that advisory role, I think, again, and I'm beating a dead horse and I apologize, right? That's really where my role comes in. And so engaging with people to make sure that that voice, those concerns potentially, the praise, right? Because not enough people are good at, Johnny, you did a fantastic job. Thank you. I appreciate you, right? It's the little things like that. And so going to those men and women, letting them know, we do love our city. We are excited about the future of Frisco, right? Here's how we can make it a skosh better, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, our culture is not wired to go out of our way to speak positivity into things. We have a unfortunate propensity to only look at the negative. But like we said, you tried several years ago, 7 years ago,
Yep.
and some would say you failed. Obviously, you're back better than ever,
Right.
at a much better time in your life and the life of the city, and you've fought to the front of the pack, and you're going to lead a campaign that's going to show people that you're the right person for the job to join the team in the city council.
Ideal.
So people have been talking a lot about the bond process. Can you speak to that, some of the things you've heard, some of the issues that voters might be dealing with?
Yeah, so again, I think it comes down to listening to the citizens, right? I've been saying a lot, your vote, your voice. But I think I'm not gonna say it's controversial, but I think there's some details that people are missing in terms of like actually how the mechanics work, right? So city staff, whether it be, engineering services or public works or, police, fire, like all of them have a list of stuff that they're looking for that obviously needs to be paid for to benefit the city of Frisco. So there is a citizen bond committee that should take into account the recommendations of staff, but also account for the recommendations of the citizens, right? And then it's all bundled, right? And it's put in front of the citizens to vote on, right? And so if there's something that the citizens have been passionate about or have requested to be on the bond, and then it mysteriously doesn't show up on the bond, I can understand how that might be potentially frustrating to people. And so I just want to make sure that in that process, right, that we are fully transparent and that the things that are important, not just to city staff, but also to our folks, end up in a place where you actually get the ability to make your voice, your choice heard. And that's really what we need to have happen.
Now, I've been a citizen of the fringe area for a while here. I don't hail from Frisco, but I do recall not many years ago driving out to Frisco when the mall was first built.
Okay.
And there was not a lot of things in between, let's say, Keller, Texas and Frisco, Texas. Since then, 20 years fast forward, it seems like it has been a lot of growth.
Yeah.
Can you talk to that?
Yeah, and to that, right, you said 20 years, so we've been, my family has been in Frisco for, in June, it'll be 19 years, right? I remember driving up the tollway when it stopped at what is headquarters, right? It said Gaylord, but you had to get off at headquarters and then go down, right? So not just that kind of major infrastructure, right? DNT going now all the way past 380. We joked about it earlier, right? I mean, there are people that live in Dallas that didn't used to cross 635, and then people kind of edged in 121, and now it's kind of 3, right? I understand that the city is expanding. I understand that there are people coming here. I think I heard the term exurb. So Frisco, there was an article, and I think it was NBC, right? They want to call it DFFW, right? They want to add Frisco into the mix of, our friends in Fort Worth, here in Dallas, and Frisco is kind of being this triangle of development, right? So some time ago, they talked a lot about this billion-dollar platinum corridor, right? And we were going to just develop along this DNT spine. But as someone who, like I said, has been there for 19 years, right? I've seen new residential communities and, kind of neighborhoods pop up. We've obviously seen a lot of large buildings come out of the ground. We've seen the Star. We've seen, right? So there's a number of things that are really awesome that Frisco's kind of known for. I think the challenge is, I guess they used to call them the Four Sisters, right? So if you think of, Plano, Frisco, McKinney, and Allen, right? My observation some time ago was it's interesting because every city has all its own stuff, right? Right? You don't need to go to Plano to watch a movie because there's a movie theater in Frisco. There's several, right? You don't need to go, right? So those things are interesting, but developing and trying to figure out how do you create the things that make for comfort for your citizens, for convenience for your citizens. But then you kind of fast forward to, there's a comprehensive plan for the city, right? So there's 70 square miles. And some of that original plan was done some time ago, right? So people get into the weeds around planning and zoning and what can go where and who can do what, and the green space, and there need to be more parks, and there's lots and lots of schools. But then it also comes down to, we're literally building a brand new development. It just happens to be near my neighborhood, right? Fields West is being hailed as this end all be all, thing, right? And that's fantastic. And it's going to be fantastic when it's done. I think the challenge is when you look at Fields West and the Star and the redevelopment of downtown and what's happening all along Stonebriar, right? There's just a lot of things happening. You've got Universal, you've got, right, there's a new hospital being built, right? It feels like a lot. And at the end, it comes down to infrastructure and roads, whether they be arterial streets or, just other surface streets. I live in the northwest part of Frisco. And if I remember when El Dorado was a 2-lane road, it is now a 6-lane road with a median. And you cannot pave your way out of traffic, right? And so as you think about increasing the density, as you think about increasing the number of people, not just citizens, but people that are passing through, people that are right? Because we're creating these destinations, right? And so like Plano's Legacy West and Shop's Legacy before it, people are going to come from all around to come to this thing in Frisco. And so it's a very complex issue, right? Because it is traffic. It is density. You are putting more people, and more people means more crime. And again, I want to remain positive. Like, I'm really excited about the opportunity that Frisco has before it, but I also want to make sure that we are careful, or at least cautious, and sustainable growth, right? This hyper growth mode of hammer down and let's go and let's race to the finish, I think is a potential mistake. But hindsight's 2020, right? We're going to look back and we're going to say, oh, we should have done it this way, or we shouldn't have done it that way. And I just want to make sure that as an elected official, that, again, I'm just going to keep saying this, that the citizens have some level of input into some of the decisions that are being made.
How do you ensure the term hyper growth isn't scary to the people that would vote for you? Because it's happening.
It's happening. It's accelerating, which is why I use the word hyper, right? So we're not in a mode of we're building a building and there's a crane. No, I mean, if you go to Frisco, there's multiple cranes, there's multiple projects, right? And they're not in one particular area, they're in multiple areas. And as I said, there is a vision, right? They're moving a lot of dirt in preparation of a bunch of cranes coming, right? And so I'm not like Gordon, like, greed is good, right? But, at the end of the day, I think you just need to be cautious and careful that you're not doing too much too fast. There's macroeconomic things that are happening in this country. There's a lot of people that have not been affected by, I'm not going to say inflation, but the recessionary trends or things that are happening in other parts of our nation are not happening necessarily in Texas and certainly not in Frisco, right? But that doesn't mean that it couldn't happen, right? It doesn't mean that whatever bubble is going to burst. And again, I would lean in on being a little bit cautious and just, I'm going to use the word sustainable, right? Continue to grow, doing it in a meaningful, intentional way, and not getting out over your skis.
So obviously we're talking about creating a better future for Frisco.
Right.
In terms of hyper growth, you mentioned it there. One of the things you could think about is, more traffic and crime spurring up. Can you speak to some of the ways that people at home should feel safe in the midst of all this hyper growth?
Yeah. So this is not going to maybe bear the test of time, but we have seen the invention of tourism burglary, right? There are people, and it's happening in Frisco, right? There are people that are literally leaving Dallas, going up the tollway, committing crimes, getting back on the tollway and heading south, right? So as you continue to create these amenities and these things, like you're pointing a bright light on the city and all of our stuff, right? Which there are people that want said stuff, right? So that creates an increased burden on our police force. It potentially creates an increased burden on our fire department, right? If most of the fire calls in Frisco aren't structure fires, right? It's EMT and it's traffic accidents and stuff like that, right? So police and fire showing up to things because there's more people here. We've talked about the future, right? There are still, it boggles my mind, right? When we moved here, there were more children outside of the school age than there were kids in the actual schools. So I'm obviously not running for ISD, but as a city council person, we still have our future, right, in those kids, right? 67,000 kids from the ages of 5 to 17 that are current and future citizens of Frisco should they choose to stay, right? So I think of their safety only in terms of, in my neighborhood, there was an example where, I'm not going to say poor planning, I'm just going to say that maybe not enough foresight and immediate action to a road that had a bend in it, and there was a crosswalk because a neighborhood was on both sides of the street and there's a brand new high school, right? So as you have increased traffic, as you have people not paying attention because they're on their phones and they're doing all the things, unfortunately, that people do, right? Are we putting the potential safety, health, and wellness of our children in harm's way because we have more folks traveling our streets, right? I can remember when I could get from my house to, let's just say, Preston and Warren, right? So the other side of the city in, call it 8 minutes, 10 minutes, right? That same trip today, on a good day, is 20 minutes. On a bad day, it's half an hour, right? So this is a weird segue to kind of traffic, right? But I know that there have been a lot of conversations about, and I've said it already, right? You can't pave your way out of traffic. Increased number of people, increased number of cars, increased number of visitors, passers through, right? There's just more people, right? And as you build all of the things, The roads, and again, this isn't always Frisco dollars. These could be county dollars. These could be state of Texas dollars. These could be federal dollars. Need to be allocated, appropriated, and then again, executed meaningfully in a good way to create those things that allow people to get, down Panther Creek. Legacy's extension just opened, right? So now you can go from Legacy from 380 all the way to 121 and beyond, right? So through the city of Frisco, when you start talking about traffic and we're bound by the lake and our friends in Little Elm, right? So 423 is really a main north-south. Legacy is now a main north-south. You've got the frontage road for DNT and DNT itself. You've got Preston, and then on the other side, you've got Coit and Custer, right? When you think of the east-west streets, right, it gets to be a lot of things. And so, again, we've seen it historically. You can't pave your way out of it, but you have to be, my word, intentional, right, in terms of what you're going to do to move traffic on surface streets through the city. And as you continue to build these increasingly large, these increasingly dense destinations, we haven't talked about Universal at all, right? But you've got a lot of people that are trying to move into these spaces, and they don't always have a lot of place to go.
So 20 years ago, 19 whatever it was years ago, I can round up to 20, you and your wife decided to settle down in Frisco, Texas, a small town back then,
Right.
And raise 2 children who have
Right.
now since grown and prospered out of the Frisco ISD and moved on to families of their own. But why have you chosen to move to Frisco and to ultimately stay in Frisco and now be a part of leading Frisco into the future?
Yeah. So the short answer is Frisco felt like home when we came to visit. Growing up in the suburbs of Chicago, Frisco felt like a traditional suburb, family first values, lots of single family home developments, all of the panache of, a suburb that was up and coming, right? And it felt good to be here. And we have continued to stay. We've built now our, second, third house. So being a member of the community, being in Frisco, watching it grow, has been tremendous. I was in consulting for a long time, and so I was traveling around the country, and so I would go away and I would see stuff, and I would come home to Frisco, and it was like, ooh, I like this, right? So it always felt really good being at home in Frisco, going to other places, talking about Frisco and what we had back where I was from. We have now started a business. This is actually multiple businesses. So being a small business owner in the city of Frisco is another reason and another logic for why I stay and also why I'm running. Small businesses are how wealth is created in this nation. And I think that the EDC does a decent job. I think our city does a good job of attracting very large employers and things. I would like to see a better job of supporting small businesses and creating wealth and offering services to the people of Frisco.
All right, current events. There's 2 propositions that voters are going to be casting their ballots on when it comes time to vote. Can you speak to those?
Absolutely. So, and this is a little contentious, unfortunately, as politics can be, but the shortcut, the FFA, the Frisco Firefighters Association, has asked to engage Civil Service 143. So it's a Texas statute, right? It's a Texas law that would allow essentially unionization, but really the protection of our men and women that are firefighters, to engage with the city by creating a board as a committee for oversight in terms of how things are run, in terms of essentially all of the things: hiring, firing, promotions, grievances, etc.
All right, so current events. There's 2 propositions the voters are going to have to cast their ballot on. Can you speak to those?
Yeah, so the first proposition is a vote on Texas statute, Civil Service 143. The second proposition is for collective bargaining that goes kind of hand in glove with that. This all came about because the initial ask was for meet and confer. So meet and confer is a very fancy term of, you and I don't really like each other, but I need you two to sit down and have a conversation and come to an agreement. And if you and I can't come to an agreement, nothing happens. We both just walk away, right? So the next step would be to collectively bargain, right? You two have to get in a room together and you will come to a decision, because if you don't, I will make said decision for you, right? And that's unfortunately where I'm coming from in my campaign. Is these men and women have been pushed to that, right? This is not what they wanted. This is not where we thought we were going to be. And so for me personally, having read the statute in detail, having asked questions of city staff and of the new fire chief, I'm confident that the men and women of the fire department, this is in their best interest, right? It is not onerous. It is not significantly different than the policies and procedures that are in place. And so you're going to hear a lot of people talk about, or I've heard a lot of people already talking about, well, it's just, it's all about the test, right? And right? There's lots of methods to hire people. As someone who's hired folks for a long time in my career, testing is certainly part. The interview is part. Aptitude is certainly part of that. Fire service is a calling, and it's different. Firemen and women, they're family, right? This is what grandpa did. This is what dad did. This is what my mom did. It's no different than military service. This is something that is a calling. It's a lifelong journey. It's not something I jump in and out of, right?
You can't do it without passion.
Yeah, they're not nomadic, right? It's not, oh, I can get a better fire job at the city next door, right? You don't see that kind of movement. So being able to protect people and their families, to me, is tantamount to everything that we should do for those men and women that are willing to risk their lives for us.
Absolutely. That was easy, wasn't it?
That was fantastic.
Hopefully, people at home, people watching this, will be able to have a greater insight into the type of leader, the type of person, the type of father, and the type of city councilman that they should be electing into that seat in John Redmond. So I'm honored, like I said in the beginning, to be your friend and to be your champion as you take on this next fight.
Thank you. And I want to thank you as well, because taking the time out of your day, your beautiful new baby, to come and sit with me, this knucklehead who's hoping to be, influencing policy and procedure going forward. But I'm super excited about Frisco and Frisco First. Thank you for being a part of this conversation and allowing me to explain a little bit more about who I am and how I'm going to represent the people of Frisco.
I'm excited to see you do it. Thanks a lot, John.
Appreciate you.